Well, I gotta say, after all the fuss and hoopla over the Twilight thing, it's nice to get back to a nice, normal, completely ordinary, and in no way gimmicky books versus movies review! Really? Alright folks, let me try to get Matt on the television here. Matt? Matt? Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire makes a better movie.
No! That thing is an abomination both as an adaptation of a story and a movie. It's cut-and-paste style adaptation in the worst possible way, and Mike Newell couldn't direct his way out of a car.
How you doing there?
Where the hell am I?
Matt, I thought we agreed that after the Twilight review that we were going to have a nice, simple, gimmick-free review of a popular children's picture book from 1963 by Maurice Sendak about a wild boy who journeys to a land of wild monsters fueled by the power of his emotions and imagination, and the Spike Jonze adaptation from 2009, which turned out a popular, critically acclaimed, and surprisingly thought-provoking cinematic experience.
Yeah, I know, Hatter. I don't know what happened. I was just sitting in front of my bookshelf background, like usual, ready to do the review, and next thing I knew, I just felt this urge to, like the wild child animal within me was just bursting to get out, and then all of a sudden my quiet bookshelf background had transformed into this stark, vast wilderness.
Matt, you're on the Slippery Elm Trail where you jog and bike regularly. There's nothing stark, vast, or wild about it.
Oh, right. Oh, okay, I guess I'll head back and do the review.
No, there's no time, Matt. We've already played the intro. You're just gonna have to do your half of the review from there.
What, from here?
Sure. What better place to review Where the Wild Things Are? Plus, your bookshelf is made of wood and the books are made of paper, and both of those things come from trees, so it's like you never left.
Okay. So, from the wilds of a biking trail, and as I emit a strange heavenly glow, this is Books vs. Movies review of Where the Wild Things Are.
This is going to be another 3-category review, just looking at characters, imagery, and story. Also, because there's not much in the way of story in either version, we're going to start with story first and work our way back to characters. That said, let's take a look at stories for round 1.
As Hatter said, there's not much here in the way of story. We follow Max, a little boy who is behaving like a little boy, and his parents send him to his room without supper, finally getting fed up with his behavior. While in his room, he imagines a journey to the land where the wild things are, a land far, far away where all sorts of ferocious beasts live. Max, as a wild thing himself, declares himself king of the wild things, and they engage in all sorts of fun adventures depicted only in pictures until Max finally gets homesick and decides to go back home where he finds his supper still waiting for him. And it's still hot. The end. The story is poignant in its simplicity. I mean, what I did right there, I basically just read you the whole book. And we've all had days as kids, and sometimes as adults, where all we've wanted to do is just run away and go somewhere where we can be wild and free. Stories like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland were born from such memories, and they resonate with everyone's innate desire to be a wild thing. But ultimately, Max goes home and leaves his wildlife behind, as we all must do. Eventually.
The movie essentially has the same story and message, just fleshed out to a full-length film. Max is actually given a little bit more backstory, so we're able to understand better why he is the way he is. His father has left him and his sister has lost interest in playing with him, and so he's feeling abandonment, and also he's on the cusp of adolescence, so he's starting to feel those confusing feelings as well. The wild things, then, are essentially reflections of Max himself, and the whole island becomes kind of an outlet for his emotions. So the whole movie is one big emotional roller coaster. It takes us through the typical day of a little kid and all the ups and downs that he feels. So the movie is not always pleasant to watch, but it's not really supposed to be. One of the biggest differences between the book and the movie is that while the book was definitely marketed to kids, the movie was just as definitely marketed to adults. Which is not to say that kids can't enjoy the movie too, but the story and characters are considerably more complicated than in Sindak's original book.
Now, if you've been watching me for a while, then you know that I usually lean more towards the complicated stories just because I like complicated stories. But in this case, I think the simplicity of the book actually serves the story better. Like Hatter said, both book and movie tell basically the same story with the same message. But what I appreciate about the book story is that it's able to do so with almost no words. The book only has 10 sentences, that's it, and honestly you could even cut those sentences out and still get the story with just the pictures. The point is made very subtly and simply, and while I appreciate that the movie delved more into the psychological issues and looked more at the individual personalities of the wild things, I found the book story more compelling. And honestly, I think that adults can get more out of the children's book than the children can get out of a movie that's pretty much marketed to adults. For that reason, I think the book told a better story here. But now let's look at one of the most important... Whoa, that's a full rainbow. All the way across the sky. So intense.
This is going to be a long review, isn't it?
What does this mean?
Let's look at imagery. Matt, talk about the pictures.
Pictures, right. Like I said before, this story is told primarily through the imagery of the illustrations. And the wild things have become pretty iconic in their appearance. I mean, if you see this thing, you know exactly what it is. And I love the creative design of the many different creatures in this world. They almost resemble familiar animals. You've got the rooster, the bull, the water creature, the cat-like creatures, and yet they still have human elements in them too. For all that we see only a few pictures of them, they're pretty expressive. We can see their joy, their fear, and their grief.
When I saw the trailers for the movie and actually saw the wild things that they had designed, I got really freaking excited, because... I mean, look at them! They look like three-dimensional versions of the pictures! Jim Henson's Creature Shop designed the puppets, and it's clear that they put a lot of work into capturing the original illustrations. Plus, I love that they use puppets and costumes. Yeah, there's some CGI, but what little there is really subtle and it blends in well. You do really feel like the creatures are really there, and not only that, but they're incredibly expressive. I mean, they really do a great job of portraying the many different emotions of these characters.
The only downside to them is that, well, they do look exactly like the book's illustrations. And while that's great and everything, it's the creativity of the original design that inspired the creativity in the puppets. Plus, the one potential problem with the movie is that it's pretty dark and unpleasant at times. There's a lot of shaky cam and a lot of moments where they try to make you feel just how cold and dirty and miserable Max is. The book's imagery is pretty clean. I mean, yeah, he gets homesick in the end, but you don't get the feeling that he's living in his own filth like you do in the movie. The book treats the experience more like a dream, while in the movie he actually runs away. In the book he's sent to his room, and the room turns into the wilderness. So he hasn't really gone anywhere, and there are hints that the movie experience is a dream too, but they treat it more like a real experience. In the book they make it clear that the story is entirely within Max's imagination.
The imagery from the movie is definitely more gritty and realistic, and that can make for an unpleasant viewing experience at times, but I really do love the many different moods and emotions that they portray with the imagery. One of the things that really irritates me about a lot of literature that's written for children is that people tend to assume that children can't feel emotions any more complex than happy or sad. And I'm not saying that Sindak's book does that at all, but it is nice to see that the movie portrays a more complex array of confusing emotions, and a lot of that comes through in the imagery. One of the criticisms that the movie has received is that a lot of the imagery is too scary or unpleasant for kids. To which I would like to quote Maurice Sindak's response. "That is a question I will not tolerate. I saw the most horrendous movies that were unfit for child's eyes. So what? I managed to survive. Plus, it's a story about a wild little kid, so you'd expect there to be major mood swings and for the camera movements to be wild and unpredictable too. In fact, it's like the camera is itself a character in the movie, playing with the rest. In my mind, the imagery portrays everything that is childhood, both the fun stuff and the miserable stuff. We've all lived through childhood. We know that childhood isn't all sunshine and roses, and the movie is not always a pleasant one and not always a happy one, but it's not supposed to be. The original pictures are wonderful, and they tell the story beautifully. And as you'd expect from a good movie adaptation, they take those pictures and those images and make them seem more real and three-dimensional.
And now it all comes down to... Did you hear something? I could have sworn I heard something. Shoot.
What is it, Matt?
Nothing. Let's look at Max and the Wild Things and characters.
Matt, is everything alright?
No, everything's fine. Probably the most important difference between the book and the movie is the fact that we're comparing a children's book of about 10 sentences to a full-length feature film that was definitely marketed more towards adults than for kids. As such, the characters in the book are comparatively simple. Max is just a typical, imaginative, wild little boy. He's simple enough to be relatable, and yet the little bit of him that we see tells us a lot.
Movie Max is considerably more complex and developed. For one thing, we actually meet his family. His father's out of the picture and his mother is struggling to raise both a teenage girl and a little boy all on her own. Max is facing a number of changes in his life, including his mother starting to date again, his sister's not being interested in playing anymore, and making that transition from childhood to adolescence. And he's pretty emotional and sensitive, which occasionally makes him wild, but he's also sympathetic. Max takes us on an emotional roller coaster throughout the movie, and his mood swings are very much like the mood swings of a wild little boy with a big imagination. He's creative but selfish, protective of his ideas. He wants to be a leader and please everyone, but he also wants to have fun. He's as complicated as a little boy can be, whereas Max in the book is just, the wild thing.
He's still an identifiable character, though, despite his lack of development. And to be fair, his lack of development is mostly due to the fact that the book is only, 10 sentences long. The other major characters in the story, of course, are the wild things, the monstrous creatures from Max's imagination. And like I said before, the wild things in the book are iconic creatures, easily recognizable. God.
As far as personalities go, however, they're pretty much just your typical monsters. I mean, you can make some predictions on what their roles are based on the pictures, but for the most part, they're just nice to look at. The movie Wild Things, however, are entirely different. Not only do they each have their own unique personalities, but each one of them seems to reflect a facet of Max's personality. So you've got the sensitive and temperamental but extremely loyal Carol, the cynical and blunt Judith, the calm and peaceful Douglas, and the more grown-up and individual KW. Not only are these creatures all representative of some aspect of Max, but they're all driven by his emotions. Their mood swings are also Max's mood swings, and when it becomes clear that Max does not want to live a life that is driven purely by emotion, he decides to go home. We also have characters like Max's mother and sister and mother's boyfriend who don't really appear in the book at all, but who add a lot to the movie and to Max's character. It's these characters and the definition that they're given that really drives the story. I like the simple characterization from the book, and it definitely works for that medium, but I like the more complex characterization from the movie more. Well, that does it for another Books vs. Movies review, and I really don't know what happened to Matt. I mean, never again. I am never going outdoors again. Walls, air conditioning, electricity, paper! Oh, sweet paper and ink in your fully manufactured form. Oh, I've missed you. See you next time. Green plaid flannel! Where would I be without you?